If you're reading first, I mean I'm the headliner.
And before I begin, I'm going to do you a favor. You should actually,
Please do not do that.
All right. Well, I'm going to stand up then.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because I know you have to sit. Unless you want me to hold that for when you do it?
Yeah.
To hold that for you?
It's like 10 minutes.
I mean, well, there's people in the audience that could do
It'll
it.
be fine.
All right, pay attention. Toby Campen had ceased being a fly. It wasn't a conscious decision and was not something that occurred to him instantaneously, like something unfly-like, emerging from a cocoon in a different form. It was not akin to a quickening, where in one brief heartbeat of time there is now life when just a single heartbeat before, well, there was none. Rather, it was something that dawned upon him, epiphanic. Ding, 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 once the transformation was already taking place. He had been a fly for years, beating the death odds of the rest of his short-lived kin and outlasting even the most resilient of brethren. Never snared in the web to be fed upon, never crushed beneath the cudgel of a rolled-up magazine or newspaper. Yes, it was true. A spider had nearly captured him when he had been very young, just out of the maggot stage, you might say, ha-ha. But he'd been cunning and agile and sharp enough to finagle his way out of that morbid transaction, and fairly recently, too. The spider, of course, had tried to devour him, a thing possessing a bristly torso and a multiplex of glossy obsidian eyes. And it was to his benefit that despite all the creature's arachnidal tendencies, it had, at its core, been saddled by the restrictions of a common human being. Yet, as a housefly, Toby Campen had been able to outmaneuver the spider, and quite deftly, seeing how he possessed visual information nearly 7 times more rapidly than the average human being, which was the form that the spider most frequently took. But what do you call a housefly without a house, without a home? How long had he been living outside of the spider's web? Time was a struggle for him, but he'd meticulously written each day down on a slip of paper he kept in his back pocket, a series of days that culminated to 4 months. So, 4 months. Or, as it happened, approximately 120 days into the life cycle of a common housefly, Mucosa domestica lianusa, which is to say, given the average lifespan of such an insect, 28 days, 30 at the very most, basically a month per lifetime, a gestational 4 months would consume the lives of at least 4 common houseflies, probably more. A spider's web is no home for a fly, he would frequently tell himself, particularly during those first unanchored nights out there in the world alone, and as he lay curled up in an abandoned storefront doorway or in some back alley, a sticky piece of cardboard beneath him as a bed. To a fly, a spider's web is a dinner table, and the fly is a meal, no love there. So he zigged and he zagged. Not as luminous as the firefly, not as majestic as the monarch butterfly, not as single-minded as the hornet, but rather as a workmanlike, utilitarian thing whose sole purpose was to perpetuate its own survival. In those first few weeks as a free insect, he picked up work with immigrants who couldn't speak the language, a congregation of flies, you might say, and he mostly kept his mouth shut to let people think he didn't know the language either. He never made enough money to afford an apartment, and who would rent to him anyway? But he was able to pay monthly for a self-storage unit, self-storage indeed, ha-ha, and he'd laugh to himself. So at least he had 4 metal walls and a metal roof over his head at night. There were free public toilets and showers down at Canyon Park, so he was able to attend to his business and keep himself somewhat presentable. That worked out for a while until an altercation brought him to the attention of the local police, who dragged him into their car, then to jail and to a cell downtown. After a time, he lost count of how often he'd been dragged to jail cells downtown. It was no different than his previous life back in the web of the spider. And in a way, those jail cells were like the spider's web too, a place where he was held prisoner and couldn't escape. Only he was never devoured at the end of each stay. Ultimately, and without ceremony, he was repeatedly tossed back out into the street. No one really cared what he'd done as long as some piece of paper got its stamp. Sometimes he would have to do community service, which was fine. Other times, he was paraded in front of a shrink who orated in long, monotonous soliloquies, and it was all that Toby could do not to fall asleep during these tedious sessions. The money he earned from day laboring he kept in an old tube sock. He took whatever jobs he could get, landscaping, construction, painting, and power washing houses and businesses, and once, some loathsome fellow with a milky eye and breath like a garbage truck paid him a cool $100 in cash to drive a rental car, no questions asked, from one part of the city to another, and just leave it there in an abandoned parking lot, the keys tucked inside the visor. This person, Philip Fracassi, but that's the track changes.
Let us say that.
I'm sorry. He did that and didn't think twice about it. He began to feel good about himself. He was still a fly, of course, but a fly cunning enough to not only escape the spider's web, but to eke out an existence among a populace of animals, people animals, who considered him nothing more than a disease-ridden nuisance. In his own small way, it was a measure of success. Did he ever return to the spider's web? No. What kind of fly would that make him? What kind of stupid suicidal decision would that be? Though what, he would sometimes wonder over those first few weeks following his escape, had ever happened to the spider? A spider in poor health, a family history of heart disease and diabetes, of malnutrition and an inability to hold down a job, a creature that had grown too old and too tired and too infirm to spin webs and snare prey. Stop, 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 stop. Because flies don't generally live long enough, he knew it was imperative to live life to the fullest. He rarely slept. He hated the claustrophobia of the storage unit, the oily smell of the soiled mattress that he slept on, which he dug out of a dumpster. So he found himself buzzing around the club scene in Silver Lake, Los Feliz, Hollywood, downtown LA. He couldn't get into most of the clubs because of the way he looked and smelled, but for every string of posh, glitzy dance clubs that lit up the boulevard, there was always some dark, dank, sewer-smelling dive just around the corner. No cover charge, cheap well drinks, outdated stripper music piped through rattling house speakers. A fly belongs on shit. It was not self-deprecating, but self-awareness. That was how a fly survived, by being consistently aware of its surroundings. There was one club in downtown LA called The Coffin, and the only way anyone would know it was there was if someone whispered about its existence into their ear. How had he found it? Who could remember now? No signage out front, no queue of would-be patrons snaking around the block. There was a section of rusty chain-link fence in front of the entranceway, and the stink of pot smoke in the air. But flies can get in anywhere. A hallway of dim red lighting, the eye-watering stink of body odor, faintly the muted pulse of industrial music reverberating through sheetrock. How do you pronounce that?
Unce.
That's the music. A pair of iron doors sliding open. Zzz, 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 goes the music now. And laid out before his compound eyes exists the writhing, undulating, spasming thorax, as each one indistinct from the next. A pulsing mass of bodies, arms, legs, exposed midriffs, and done-up punky hair, knee-high pleather boots, javelin heels, fingernails filed to points, to claws, to razors, and glow-in-the-dark contact lenses, NASA satellite earrings, jewelry like fireworks, glimpsed tattoos, shameful, indecipherable, panty lines piped through sheer fabric skirts, hips like metronomes ticking back and forth, knock, 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 lacy bra tops, exposed, glittered décolleté, I don't know what that word means. Errant shoulder collisions, spicy perfume, dismissive apologies, scraping barstool legs, dentine breath. Hey there, what's your name? Toby. Buy me a drink, Toby? He had the tube sock full of cash in his back pocket of his jeans, prominent as a softball. Sure, what would you like? Tequila and soda. Okay, with a lemon, a real lemon. Sure, okay, he said, although he didn't know what a drink with a fake lemon might entail. You're sweet, she said, and she ran her fingers through his unkempt, greasy hair. I can tell, even beneath all your crud. Oh, he said, and shuddered at her touch. Don't worry, I like crud. She turned and smiled at him, and he got a look at her for the first time, saw that she had fangs, rattlesnake teeth. Whoa, he said, are those real? My tits? No, your teeth. She laughed, said, they come out at night. So do I, he said. Her eyes were luminous too, not the trashy glow-in-the-dark contact lenses some of the others wore, but something more subtle, subdued, deeper in color and luminosity, in complexity even, firefly-like. Toby felt something flutter in the center of his thorax. She twirled away, insinuating herself back among the crowd, that throb and bulge of bodies, those writhing limbs and spiky hair circulating in some ritualistic demonstration on the dance floor. The bartender arrived, a rotund dude with bulldog jowls, and Toby ordered a drink. What kind of tequila? Toby considered. He knew shit all about tequila, so he asked, what's good? The bartender hoisted a gold bottle of Patron, and Toby shrugged his shoulders. He dug his sock out of his back pocket, peeled out a few damp bills, laid them on the bar. The bartender frowned. Your money stinks like feet. Why don't you open up a tab, pay with a credit card? Why don't you mind your fucking business, Toby suggested. The bartender paused, glared at him. He was clutching the bottle of Patron in a chokehold, and his knuckles looked like the swollen knots on a tree branch. Just when Toby thought the guy might lean over and punch him square in the face, the guy broke out into a grin, exposing a mouthful of two small yellow teeth. You're funny, bartender says. I like you. The drink sat beside him untouched for an unaccountable amount of time. Where was she? Where had she gone? Was she still out there on the dance floor? Had she ever really existed in the first place? He scanned the crowd, the dim, red-tinged light not helping, smoke in the air clouding everything, searching for her lacquered purple spikes of hair, those incandescent eyes bobbing like neutrons in that sea soup of flailing, gyrating bodies. Then, coming up behind him, warm breath in his ear, my savior. She reached over his shoulder and took the drink. He pivoted around on the bar stool and watched her, really watched her. He could smell her, a perfume that wasn't necessarily sweet, wasn't necessarily floral, but some dry desert offset smell that reminded him of summers in his youth before he and the spider had moved to Central City East, and of hours spent traversing the desert canyons by himself, chasing snakes and lizards, catching the fleeting scent of dry desert flora on the hot, dry air, wherever a slight breeze dying to shuttle by. He thought of scorpions scuttling along the acrid ground, of hornets nesting in the hollowed-out carapaces of sun-browned cacti. I wanted lemon, she said. I wanted real lemon. There was a lemon wedge on her glass, so Toby didn't know what constituted real lemon from fake lemon. He had been nursing a lukewarm Stella Artois all night, so what the fuck did he know? He asked, what's your name? She laughed in his face, said, wouldn't you like to know? I would. I know you, she said, and those radiant eyes narrowed the slightest bit. She was beautiful, hypnotically so. You're a Renfield. What's that? Renfield, she said, breaking it down into two distinct syllables, heavy on the emphasis, as if this might clarify things for him, which it didn't. He simply said, you're beautiful. She laughed again, her breath warm and fruity in his face, and said, I'm too dangerous for you, Renfield. What makes you so dangerous? Those teeth? I'm a bloodsucker, a child of the night. I could bite you and turn me, into a creature of the night like me. I'm already a creature of the night, he said, then added, although maybe not exactly like you. She laughed a third time, just tossed her head back on her neck and laughed, and Toby stared at the smooth whiteness of her throat, the delicate lines of her jugular, and at those elongated incisors curved like miniature elephant tusks sprouting from her gum line. What's your real name anyway, she said. Toby, I already told you that. That's a pussy name. You're a pussy, Toby. I'm a fly. Her shimmering eyes widened. She appeared to like that answer. She said, oh yeah, a fly, huh? That's something. You just buzzing around? On the walls, mostly, he said, observing. Slowly, she closed her mouth. Those fangs disappeared. It was like watching the curtain on a stage draw closed. Something akin to a smile overtook her face, and once again, Toby Campen, 22 years old, felt the strange fluttering sensation in the center of his wiry, bristling thorax. The lifespan of a common housefly can be summed up in heartbeats. Wah-wump, wah-wump, wah-wump. Come here, she whispered, hot breath on his ear again. And that dry desert flower smell engulfed him as she drew closer, closer. Fine white hairs along the ridge of her jaw, tingling against his own. Closer, closer, sensitive as a fly. All circuits firing. Slow motion now. Wah-wump, wah-wump. Closer, and she leaned in some more, and she opened her mouth. He felt those curled tusks graze the side of his neck, the tender exposed meat of his throat. And there, ow! He slapped a hand to his neck as she pulled away, laughing at him. You bit me. Still laughing. And then the drink was placed down on the top of the bar, mostly finished. And when he looked in her direction once more, the woman, whatever her name was gone. Hey, he yelled, before he realized he was yelling. Anyway, no one heard him over the thump and pound, the unts of the music. He glanced over at the bartender with the bulldog jowls, and he saw he was chuckling too. Where'd she go? He demanded, but the bartender wasn't having any of it. Toby scanned the dance floor, searching, hunting, as he did the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. And at some point he realized he had ceased being a fly. He'd become something with an agenda, and flies did not have agendas. For the first time in his life, he'd become something else. A transformation had taken place, all without him knowing or understanding, and he felt in the midst of it chemical changes, a body rearranging, something he didn't think would ever happen to a common housefly like him, because when he took his hand away from his throat, his fingers were tacky with blood.